Before the video begins, I'd like to state a few things. This video contains some very graphic and disturbing stories coming from emergency workers, such as police officers and EMTs. I ask that you please respect them in the comments, as these were very traumatic experiences for them. I hope this video helps spread awareness on how hard their jobs are. That being said, let's begin. Number 1. Okay, so I was an EMT in LA for 2 years many moons ago. So we get a call on a DUI who hit a bunch of cars at a stoplight. All hands get called on deck. When we get there, 5 units were already there, plus 2 fire trucks, cops, and, everything else. It was absolute carnage. There were medics patching people up all over the scene, several critical transports. One EMT is treating the DUI. To say that he was blind drunk is not an exaggeration. His face was bleeding but otherwise unharmed. This guy was in an old steel round-fendered pickup truck and hit a group of cars going 50 miles per hour. Never hit the brakes. I head over to the medic who looked like he was in charge, and he immediately gave me a blue tarp. Blue tarps are not good in EMS land, and there were a bunch of them lying around covering various lumps and bumps in the street. He tells me to go cover some white thing in the street. So what had happened was that this big blue missile had hit a Pinto driven by this Hispanic family. The back blows open, and the oldest child hurtles out of the back and 60 feet down the street and lands on his head. A human body, when thrown or dropped out with force, doesn't go boing, it goes splat. The kid's body blew apart like a bug on a windshield. Hence all the blue tarps. There were pieces all over the street. The white thing I was asked to cover up was the top third of the kid's skull. It still had tufts of hair on it. I had nightmares for years. So then we're asked to transport the parents. This was far away, and the worst. Their faces were all sliced up and they were screaming in Spanish. They had just seen their child blow apart right in front of them. The floor of the unit was slick with blood by the time we got to the hospital. The whole time they're screaming, I can still hear it in my head. I was crying but trying to be quiet so they wouldn't hear me. I was heartbroken for them. They were carrying their new baby, 3 days old, in her lap, who got thrown into the windshield. Died 3 days later of cerebral hemorrhage. So of their 3 kids, they had 1 left. I never found out what happened to the DUI. Number 2. A guy high on dust, aka PCP, went over to his adult sister's house right before they left for a family birthday party. As the family is packing the car up, the guy remains behind in his 7-year-old niece's bedroom, still high on dust. His niece forgets something in her room and runs back upstairs into the apartment. As soon as she reaches the apartment, she hears a gunshot. She walks into her room and sees her uncle proned out on the floor, bleeding profusely from the back of his head, brains all over her bedroom wall. Family calls 911. I show up, walk in, and assume the guy is dead by the lack of movement and loss of blood. I find the gun, make it safe, and out of nowhere hear a huge, deep breath and see the guy's chest moving. With half of his brain blown apart, the guy was still alive for at least 10 minutes, but unresponsive. Medics transported him to the hospital where he died, but donated his organs. In the end, it's the little girl who will live with that picture of her uncle for the rest of her life. It would be nice if you could take every kid out of every bad situation so they have a fighting chance to live a normal life, but that's unfortunately not how it works. Number 3. So a suicidal female walks to the top of a 9-story hospital parking garage. She does a backward swan dive off the top, trying to kill herself. She ends up landing on both of her feet, which take all the impact. Every bone from her feet up to her first rib is shattered, but somehow she was still alive as I got there first. She looked like a slinky as EMTs picked her up from the ground to transport her, which in the end was futile. But for the few minutes I was on scene with her, I was able to speak to the woman who was still conscious. The most peaceful and eerily quiet conversation I had with a person who knew they were dead. She talked about her family life and how she felt abandoned. She felt helpless and with no faith in life, just like a vicious dog backed into a corner. She wanted me to tell her family that she was sorry but didn't regret her decision. Very stoic, if you ask me, and someone who was intent on killing themselves. Not just a cry for help scenario. Number 4. My dad is currently sitting right next to me and has a story. He has 20 years active patrol duty and then 7 as a sheriff. We got a call from this one woman saying, "Mrs. Smith is 90 years old and we haven't seen her in 7 weeks. Can you perform a wellness check?" This was in the middle of August after a couple streaks of 100-degree weather. 7 weeks is a long time. So me and my partner go over and lo and behold, no visible AC unit in this 100-year-old house. So we load up our noses with Vicks and open the door, and yeah, the Vicks didn't help. That house was well over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This lady had basically melted into a huge mess with some human features still visible on her couch. The vapor her body was giving off was on the windows like condensation. My partner and I both threw up and called the coroner, who basically had to remove this lady with her couch cushions. It was really bad. The poor lady didn't have family or anything. She had missed multiple doctor appointments or something like that, and they alerted them that she might not be okay. Number 5. My partner and I got a tip from a narcotics source to check out an abandoned bowling alley for some activity. It was the middle of the day, so we didn't really expect anything to be going on right then. We called in and then pulled up from the back entrance to have a look around. Lo and behold, there were heavy chains on all the doors except for one side door where the chain had been cut with an angle grinder or something similar. The bowling alley faced a fairly busy highway, so our first thought was that local drug dealers were using it as a convenient stash or pack spot, or that there were squatters inside. We pulled our weapons and flashlights, called for another car, and then went in. We came in from the side, looking across the lanes, about even with the scoring terminals. A quick look around, and it was obvious that people had been there. Empty beer cans, cigarette butts everywhere, some boxes of sandwich bags sitting out on the little tables. The place smelled like 20 years' worth of cigarette smoke, mildew, wet wood, old plastic, rusty metal, and musty seat cushions. It was a very familiar smell after Katrina. I don't remember who saw her first, my partner or me. There was a woman at the far end of the lanes, away from the door and hidden from the front windows. She was in an orange dress, the skirt pulled up around her waist and the top pulled down under her breasts. She was lying on the floor between two benches as if she were passed out drunk. A young black lady. She was wearing very dirty sandals with gold-colored straps and little fake jewels across the tops. Her skin was dark, shiny, and blotchy and contrasted sharply with the soft, bright orange material. Her head was completely removed, crudely and raggedly as though it was sawn off. We stared at her for a few seconds, taking it all in, the colors washed out somewhat by the harsh beams of our bright tack lights. All my partner could muster was the word, "Goddamn." I barfed into my mouth before the smell even really registered. The scene turned out to have been a couple of days old, and the metallic, rotting smell was turned up to 11 by the midday heat trapped inside the building. There was a huge pool of blood around her torso and neck, almost black, and blending into the dark industrial carpet that was between the lanes and the snack bar. Her limbs were grotesquely swollen and flung outward, the straps of her sandals digging into her feet. Backup pulled up right as we staggered back through the side door and into the harsh sunlight. It was our supervisor and the young officer he was FTOing. We explained the situation and he called for more units and the coroner so they could secure and begin processing the scene. We put some Vicks on and went back in to look behind the snack bar and the counter where the shoes are. The sergeant found the lady's head on the floor behind the snack bar. Her teeth were showing as if she were growling and her eyes were swollen and puffed out. There were several squadrons of flies and gnats buzzing around the head. She was wearing a wig which had partially come off, and the whole thing was almost comical, like a wax head where the details weren't quite right. But my brain kept screaming at me that this was an actual person's head. It felt like all the emotions I could possibly feel were fighting together in my stomach. I've seen hundreds of corpses throughout my careers, but this one was burned into the film of my memory. We continued to perform some mundane functions at the scene for a little while, but once others started arriving, our lieutenant sent us back to the office to start writing up our notes. The investigation later revealed the woman was a prostitute. She was involved with a drug dealer who used the bowling alley for business purposes and to entertain clients. I think the story came to be that she was offered as payment to another drug dealer from Central America, and this person murdered her while he was having sex with her, right there on the floor. He slit her throat with a knife and continued until she was fully decapitated, either during or right after the rape. I think I remember that the suspect was identified, but I know he was never caught. This was by far the worst scene I ever saw firsthand. 6. My dad is a police officer, and they had a scene the day before Halloween. This guy had killed his mom, chopped off her head, and then dragged her body into the street, and then he jumped in front of a train. Meanwhile, this woman walking by thought it was a Halloween prank and picked up the lady's head. When she realized it was real, she tossed it really far away. So the crime scene in between her and her son was in like 7 different places. The guy had apparently been off of his meds for 4 days and was scheduled to meet with his psychiatrist in 2 days. Tons of people walked past her body and head and didn't even realize it was real. They all just thought it was a Halloween prank. The whole thing was just really messed up. 7. I joined the military at 18 and became a cop. The very first night of shift, within the first 30 minutes, we got a call of a baby not breathing. I was with my supervisor at the time, and when the call came in, he put his foot down and didn't let up until we made it to the address. As soon as I ran into the residence, the mom was screaming hysterically and holding the baby, yelling over and over again. I was right out of boot and tech school and freshly spun up on CPR. I grabbed the baby and started CPR, knowing the whole time I performed it that there was no way I was going to bring this child back from the beyond. I could tell he had been gone for quite some time, and even if I did bring him back, it wouldn't matter, because the brain had been without oxygen for too long. I kept on performing CPR until the paramedics arrived. When the paramedics ran in about 10 minutes later, they gave me the "he's gone" look, but they knew why I was trying. The poor mother and father were a mess on the floor, praying for a miracle right behind me. The paramedics took over, taking the baby with them to the waiting ambulance. After the ambulance departed the scene with the baby and the parents, I remember standing on the front lawn with my supervisor and staring at the night sky, smoking a cigarette, wondering just how in the fuck I was going to get through the rest of the night without bawling in front of everyone. Somehow I remained stoic the rest of the night, but I did kill 2 packs of cigarettes. Not much else was said that night except maybe during our report, and even then little needed to be said. We found out later that the baby had died of SIDS, and there wasn't anything I could have done to save him, or anyone could have done for that matter. This did comfort me a little bit, but it was still a horrible experience, especially at the age of 18. This was roughly 12 years ago. I have 2 kids of my own now, 5 years and 2 years, and I worry about them constantly. During the entire SIDS stage where they were susceptible to it, I would wake up in a panic and sprint to their rooms to make sure they were still breathing. Fuck SIDS.